Well, welcome. I'm Dr. Karshner. I'm a professor of English here, and I am also the creative writing certificate coordinator, which is, I just totally made that up, but somebody has to do it. But I want to welcome you to the second annual Storytellers Cafe to celebrate creative writing and the arts at Robert Morris University. We always hear that RMU is a business school. But I think it's important to point out that the art, writing, and content creation is very much a part of RMU's DNA. It is my pleasure to introduce to you tonight the combined Fall 24 creative writing classes. Working from premise to publication, these amazingly talented writers from across the RMU community have written and polished some incredible work that they're going to share with you tonight. When I became the creative writing guy 2 years ago, Professor Lucas and I wanted to do two things. Number one, correct the problems we saw in the creative writing programs that we went through. So we decided that we would focus focus less on the product of writing and more on the process, revision and marketing. So as we talked about actually in my class today, this whole idea of the business of writing also, which then put us more in line with RMU's motto of English with a professional focus. And two, we wanted to make creative writing more than an English thing. We wanted writing to be an RMU thing, and we're getting there. Our students tonight represent English, media arts, sports management, and education. So we're just getting started, and our creative writing certificate is designed to serve not just writers, but also content creators from all majors. We don't teach creative writing here solely. We learn to be storytellers. Historian Neil Price stresses the importance of recognizing that we live through, in, and die into the world of story. When you think about it like that, there is nothing more important than being the keeper of your own stories. And that's why we're here tonight, to celebrate storytelling like only RMU can. So Storytellers Cafe is for all of our community. After the reading tonight, stick around for our open mic, and again, the sign-up sheet is in the back. And now, I would like to introduce my creative writing partner, award-winning author, and RMU's first Roger Gillen visiting writer, Professor Meagan Lucas.
A good ending in fiction is both surprising and inevitable. It's debatable, I think, how satisfying, sorry, I just got braces and I'm learning to talk around them, how satisfying it's required to be, which, if you've read my work, you already know. That's how I feel. My preference actually is for the end of the story is to not actually have an end, but rather just the beginning of something new. And so our stories, like our lives, become a series of new beginnings, cycles of starting over. I think sounds more exciting than end. Rebirth versus death. And so circles are also really important in creative writing, particularly in fiction. And so I'm pleased that it was in this room 3 years ago that I first addressed the RMU community as the first Roger Gillen visiting writer, since this will be my last address here at RMU as I embrace new opportunities and my cycle of personal rebirth begins again. From my first talk here, I've always striven to give you transparency about the creative writing field, and while I have this soapbox, I'm going to try to do just that. Everywhere I go, all the students want to talk about AI and about our future as creative writers in a world that is changing faster than we can even imagine. But I want to say that there's always going to be room for storytelling as long as you can make yourself timeless, and that you do that through boldness and honesty. And yeah, you can instruct ChatGPT to write you a story, and I have had nobody in this room, but some of my students do that. But it won't be as good as something that you're going to write from your heart. AI does a really great job on some things, but it's not really all that good at being human. So to compete, what we have to do is what it can't do. We have to be weird. We have to be real and vulnerable and brave on the page. And it has been such an incredible honor to work here with you for the last 2 years, to be trusted to carry your stories. And as we part, I just want to leave with you this. Continue the work. Be brave, be honest and bold, and go harder. That's the only thing that we can do that AI can't. All right, Dr. Karshner, I think we're ready to get these guys going.
I feel like we need some kind of entrance music. So, Joe, can you work that in? Some, explosions. All right, so first up tonight is, our first writer is Sarah Estes.
Hello everyone, my name is Sarah Estes. I am a UX UI major with a minor in graphic design, and the name of my fiction piece is Naboro Village, and I kind of want to give a little bit of context first of what it's about. We were told for our fiction pieces to pick an article that we thought was interesting and kind of build off of that. So there is a village in Japan that's a little bit abandoned called Nagoro Village, and there was a woman that grew up there and moved away when she was a young child, and her name is Sakumi Ayano, and I actually have her as a character in this writing, but you guys won't get to meet her, unfortunately. But she made, in order to keep the village alive, 400 really creepy scarecrows based off of the people that lived there. So I kind of wanted to add a horror element to it, but I haven't finished it, so I hope you guys enjoy this piece that I made. So, do you think we're going to find the village? Arya said, taking a bite out of the rations of food she packed for the short journey. June sighed. I have no idea if I'm going to be honest. It feels like we've been searching for hours. The GPS keeps recalculating. June then sighed again and put his food and canteen down. Ever since the cities were bombed, we've been doing everything we can to survive. The radiation is spreading like wildfire, and we are running out of time, June thought to himself, looking at Arya. Arya then stands up, almost in a leap. Online, I've seen it. Naboro Village. It's creepy, it's abandoned, and it's perfect for our research. If we find something, anything in this village, we can use it to rebuild. We have a chance. June smirks, looking up at her. All right. Let's get going then. We must find something at least before the sunset. We can't be caught out here in the cold. June stands up, grabbing both their bags and pushing the old shed door open to make way. After about 15 minutes of walking, June and Arya come up upon an old bus station, faded panes and severely tattered, and not to mention covered in vines and fallen debris. We are going to have to stay here for tonight and continue the journey downhill. It won't be safe if either of us slip from the mud going down, and I don't want to get caught in the rain again, June says as he pulls some of the fallen branches away from the bus's doorway. Anything is better than the wet, cold ground, Arya says, grabbing June's bag from him, walking through the now open doorway. Night fell slowly, creating a beautiful ambience of misty fog around the bus station. Both June and Arya spent the remaining daylight to reinforce the quick door they put together for safety. The seats that were held on the walls looked too worn to support the weight, so they both opted to build a bed on the floor of the station. June, wake up, Arya said in a whisper, lightly shaking him. What is it? June slowly sat up, rubbing his eyes. Was there always an iron bench across the bus station? Arya said, glancing down at him. Yes, June, now attempting to get Arya off his shoulder to look. But did it always have a man sitting on it? Right as Arya could finish, June stood up, his eyes locked onto the figure of the bench. What the fuck is that? June said in a snarl, now pushing Arya behind him. June, what are we supposed to do? All we have is a small knife, Arya said nervously. Give it to me and stay here. If anything happens, I want you to run as fast as you can back the way we came. June then kicked the makeshift door out of the entryway of the bus station in a loud crumbling crash. The figure didn't flinch. Holding the knife steady with the blade ready, June approached the figure, but as he got closer, however, he stopped, looking up at Arya. Arya, come here, darling. June popped the knife closed and stretched his hand out to Arya, who was now frightened and obviously confused. Slowly, as she came to June, he started to chuckle, then grabbed her hand, pulling her closer. It's a doll? Arya said, pulling away from June. It's a scarecrow, actually, June said, brushing the dried corn stalks from the small tears in the seams of the scarecrow's neck. It's a farmer. It seems like he's sitting here waiting for the bus. Why would a scarecrow dressed like a farmer be sitting at a bus stop? Arya said, scoffing at June's badly timed humor. I'm serious. Did you look at any of the articles online? It's an old art project. People would come to Naboru to see the old buildings left to dust, and one day people started seeing scarecrows. June said, brushing the leaves from the scarecrow's lap. Yeah, but I thought they were closer to the village. I really hope we don't run into any more than this one. It's so frickin' creepy, dude, Arya said, staring at the faded face of the scarecrow. We must be pretty close to Naboru then, June said, walking back to the bus station. Packing the remainder of their things, June and Arya began their descent downhill. Now that the ground had soaked up the majority of the rain, it was far less dangerous and much quicker to get down through the wooded areas. Thank you.
Sarah was very excited to say a dirty word, so I'm glad. Our next reader is Amy Crutchfield.
This is from my short story, The Long Game. It follows a young woman named Billy, who in previous scenes attempts suicide. In this scene, she's returned with her mother to her childhood home from the hospital in order to recover. Billy stared intently at her reflection. Her face looked sickly, pale, and twisted with grief. Her thin shoulders slumped beneath her heavy coat. I look pathetic, she thought. I look stupid. Fuck you, she said out loud, staring her reflection in the eyes. She probed that reflection, searching for something, some meaning, some sign of life. Fuck you, she said again. You can't even die properly. Billy pressed her palms to the mirror and wanted to cry, but she was too tired to cry again. She had grown weary of tears. It was still now. It was so still. Grasshoppers sang outside below the windowsill. The sky was clear, and the stars were bright. Billy breathed deeply, slowly, and shakily. She peered around the room. She felt it had been so long since she had lived here in this room, but it was only a couple of years. So much had gone wrong in so little time. She was still for a long time, just looking around, trying to steady her erratic breathing. As the night deepened, the crickets outside grew louder. Billy slipped her coat off, pulled her comforter off her bed, and wrapped it around her shoulders. She stood in place for a moment, wavering, unsure of where to go, before she wandered awkwardly back over to the floor-length mirror, teetering with the weight of the comforter around her, and sat herself on the floor in front of it. She stared at herself. The room was dim, lit only by the lamp on the bedside table, which had a warm glow. She stared at her reflection with earnest eyes. The longer she stared, the more discontent with herself she became. She searched her mind for a version of herself that didn't cause disgust. Her mind began filing the years. Her brief stint in college, miserable as she had been. High school, not even worth thinking about. Middle school, a smaller than average little girl with long, unkempt hair and a sketchbook tucked into the bohemian patchwork bag on her hip. How long had it been since Billy had made art? Further back, she thought. Elementary school. Climbing trees, catching toads and snakes and bringing them into the house. Anyone might expect her mother to be horrified, but she wasn't. She always responded with curiosity and interest and the suggestion that they observe the critters outside. Memories of parks, her mother taking her on walks through the woods, the creeks, her sneakers covered in mud. That was a version of Billy she had forgotten about, the version who ached for the outdoors, who wanted to sketch everything she saw with meticulous accuracy, who didn't care about success or failure. She looked into the reflection of her eyes and imagined she was looking at this younger version of herself, the ragamuffin young girl with filled sketchbooks, intense curiosity, and a gentle love for being alive. Green eyes stared back at her. This sickly reflection didn't seem worth staying alive for. But maybe that little ragamuffin girl, maybe she was worth living for.
Our next reader is Gideon Jimfy.
All right. My piece is a fiction piece titled Broken Fragments of the Forsaken, and this is an excerpt from that. The game ends here, and so do your chances of finding her. Frank clenched his jaw. He grabbed a knife, pricked his finger, and pressed it onto the scroll. As the blood soaked the parchment paper, the cards appeared in front of him, old and worn, but 5 to a set. His eyes met the man across the table. Let the game begin. Frank sat across from the man with 5 cards in his hand. The man with the smooth voice unwavering, "You may go first." Is the skull card in my left hand? No. One of Frank's cards dissolved into thin air. He blinked in surprise. Well, this may be easier than he thought. But then it was the man's turn. He steepled his hands. His eyes glint with something darker. His first question seemed innocent, but his tone behind it was anything but. Tell me, Frank, have you ever truly forgiven yourself for failing her? The man and his voice smooth and unwavering. What? This has nothing to do with the game. Oh, it has everything to do with the game. I don't know what you're talking about. But this question, so simple, but have you ever forgiven yourself for letting someone down when it mattered the most? The man's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. Ah, but you do, don't you? It was your fault, wasn't it? What happened to her mother? And now you're here, trying to fix something that you couldn't before. Frank opened his mouth to argue, but words could not come out. As his silence stretched on, 2 of the cards ignited in his hand, burning away in the flash of light. Interesting. The truth eludes you more than you think, the man said. I'll keep going, he muttered under his breath, forcing him to focus on the remaining cards. He asked another question, but his confidence had been shaken. The game felt quite simple on the surface, but the psychological toll was becoming very evident. By the time the round ended, Frank had lost. The cards revealed itself to be a skull mocking him, and the man raised an eyebrow. 1 round to me, it seems, he smirked, almost relishing in Frank's discomfort.
Our next reader is Olivia Icegroup.
My name is Olivia Icegroup. I'm a secondary English education major, and I'll be reading an excerpt from my fiction piece entitled Double Dealing. In this piece, I experimented with the tropes of detective fiction with a factual story about a professional wedding crasher. Our main character, Sebastian, was just paid $5,000 from Veronica, soon-to-be bride, and readers do not yet know what Veronica paid him to do, but they do know that Veronica believes her husband her soon-to-be husband has cold feet because he disappears for days and acts suspiciously. Veronica explains to Sebastian that paying him for his services is the only way she can get out of her situation because she doesn't have the guts to do it herself. My excerpt will pick up from Sebastian's point of view and when he is getting ready to do what he was paid for, and readers will find out exactly what that is. I rehearsed my lines for a few minutes, referring back to the script I had in my notes app. I hardly needed the script anymore as I had this almost down pat, but I still looked it over. I straightened my bow tie as I looked at myself through the camera on my phone. My hair was slicked back and my black suit was form-fitted. I got a new one over the weekend using the money Veronica paid me. I think this was the nicest I've looked since Grandma's funeral a few years ago. Dread started to fill my chest. Despite the thrill of it all, I always hated the look on the groom's face after I completed my job. I walked out of the tiny supply closet I was hiding in. The smell of chemicals filled my nostrils as I walked the halls trying to find the ceremony. I think the smell of chemicals from the closet had stuck to my clothes. As I walked, I passed a few people still rushing to their seats. I turned left down a hallway and was met with a grand entrance. I quickly hid behind the door so no one saw me. I just had to wait until I heard my cue. As I waited, my mind wandered to Ben. I remembered the last time we hung out. It was after I met his parents for the first time, and we walked the streets of downtown. We walked hand in hand, the lights of the city all around us. I couldn't wait to see him again. It was coming up on our 6-month anniversary, and I decided I was going to take him to the same restaurant we went on our first date. I didn't get to see Ben that often as he travels for work, but every other weekend of his is mine. As I waited, my mind could not help but picture him at the end of that aisle and myself being the one to meet him there. I was pulled on my thoughts when I heard my cue. It all happened so fast. It always did. Without a second thought, I turned the corner of the grand entrance and saw Veronica at the end of the aisle in her puffy white wedding gown. "I object to this wedding," I yelled. I heard the gasps of relatives and whispers all around the room. I kept my eyes on the bride, not wanting to see the groom's face just yet. The whole time she kept her eyes on me. She smiled, but I could see the pain behind it. She felt bad about what she was doing. If her husband did have cold feet and was cheating on her, she didn't deserve it. "I object. Veronica, I am in love, and I think it is time you leave." I cut myself off the second I mentioned him because it was the first time I allowed myself to look at the groom. It was my Ben.
Okay, our next reader is Andrew Komorowski.
All right, I'm Andrew Komorowski, and I'm an English major, and I'm reading an excerpt of the animal encounter that we wrote creative nonfiction about in Dr. Karshner's class. So I'm picking up somewhere in the middle of the story of when I was on a Partners in the Parks trip hiking in Georgia, and the story kind of goes from there. We stopped our hike to look out over the valley. As we stopped, I looked up and spotted a hawk circling us overhead. I'd seen plenty of big birds high in the sky. This is the first time I'd ever seen one so close. The massive bird didn't just make a quick flyby over us, but spent a few minutes making big circles above our heads. It was even close enough we could see its massive talons. Well, there was never a point that I felt like we were in danger from the bird, since I feel like 3 adults could easily fend off one big bird. Seeing this massive bird circle overhead for a few minutes did make me feel something. For the first time in a while, seeing this big bird made me feel small. Nature makes us feel small all the time, right? But this time felt different. Usually, when I get to appreciate nature, it's on my terms, maybe looking out over a scenic overlook or somewhere else, like I was earlier. Times that give me the chance to marvel at how great the creation is that I'm looking at. But rarely do I get to appreciate nature in a way that's totally out of my control, like seeing this majestic bird solely by chance. It's the idea of things happening solely by chance like this that really makes me feel small. I've always tried to be in perfect control of my life, and I've always been a little bit of a control freak, maybe more than a bit. But as much as I like to be in perfect control of my life all the time, there's a great big world out there that wants nothing to do with that. Even though this idea of things being out of control has a negative connotation, it doesn't always have to be this way. Throughout our entire hiking group that day, 12 people would have crossed the ridgeline where we saw the hawk over an hour ago, but we were the only 3 hikers who saw any birds at all that day. Even though I'm just one small part of a big world, I firmly believe that things happen for a reason. Looking back, it was events that were wholly by chance that even brought me to the Appalachian Trail in Georgia to see this bird in the first place. This starts with me hurting my shoulder playing soccer and having to get surgery. The surgery forced me to take time off from all the physical activities that I spend much of my time doing. This time off from being active means I have more time to spend focusing on schoolwork, which gives me more free time overall. Then, all this free time that I have gives me the chance to look into and apply to be part of the Partners in the Parks program. Without this long chain of events, I would have never found myself there in Georgia in the first place. Even further, if I had never gone on the Partners in the Parks trip, I would have never found my passion for backpacking. And without that passion, I wouldn't be through hiking the Appalachian Trail next year. All these big events in my life have been through 1 or 2 small happenings that have spurred a long chain of events to get me right where I need to be. Now, as I get ready to through hike the Appalachian Trail next year, I find myself in a situation where I feel smaller than ever. It really is me versus a monumental challenge, taking on 2,000 miles of trail with everything I need on my back. The biggest challenge in this trek will not be the gear, the weather, or the miles, but it'll be the mental one. Understanding that as I walk in the woods for 5 months, so many things are going to happen that'll be outside of my control. And that's okay. I will only be a small dot on the map of a long trail, and all I can do is move forward on it. As much as I want to have control of all the factors of that experience, I just can't. All I can control is what I eat and how far I go. Everything else is out of my control.
I want to mention too, Andrew will be doing a blog as he hikes the Appalachian Trail, so we can follow his progress. Like I said when I started this, that we've tried to make creative writing to be more applicable across the college, and so it's always nice when we get someone who's I know that we were just having the talk about the English versus UX UI split, but we're all artists, so it's also nice when we have someone come from another part of the campus. And so our next reader, Jasmine Majors, and she is in sports, so that's nice. Jasmine.
Hello, everyone. So like he said, I'm Jasmine Majors. I'm a senior sport management major here. And this creative nonfiction piece for me was deeply personal. It was a reflection on love and loss and the unexpected ways we find connections through nature. Through this moment, I explored the enduring presence of a loved one taken too soon, the lessons she left behind, and how her spirit continues to guide me. It's a story about finding beauty in the ordinary and the strength to keep moving forward, even in the face of grief, where a butterfly, a symbol of transformation and freedom, becomes a bridge between the past and the present. So here is a few paragraphs from Spread My Wings. My alarm blared through my room, pulling me out of my sleep. Half awake, I got ready for another ordinary day in 8th grade. It was a freezing January morning, just like it is outside right now, and I could feel the chills in my bones. Our school uniform was the usual, striped polo, khakis, and thankfully, the option of wearing sneakers. The school acted like they were doing us a huge favor by letting us wear sneakers with the uniform. Nothing says style quite like a U.S. polo shirt paired with Jordan 6s. As I made my way downstairs to the front window and front door, something felt different. When I reached the bottom step, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. The expression on my mother's face filled me with questions I was not ready to ask. But no matter how many questions swirled through my mind, none of them could have prepared me for the moment, for what she was about to say. In a quiet, hesitant voice, she reached out to hug me and softly said, "I want to tell you this before you see it anywhere else. People are already posting it all over Facebook." There was no greater pain than seeing a loved one murdered online. In her arms, my body went numb, and I had no courage to speak. Janice was shot in her chest in a bar parking lot. A bar parking lot? A bar. How could have this had happened? Did her life mean so little to her shooter? January 26, 2016 left a permanent scar on my heart and taught me a harsh truth. A man's pride often can't handle rejection, especially in public. She turned him down twice at a bar, and her final moment came in the parking lot. Afterwards, love and condolences flooded my Facebook feed, just as my mother had warned me they would. My mother got the call at 6:30 in the morning from my uncle, who was in Virginia while we were in Pittsburgh. He passed the devastating news to her, and she, in turn, told her sisters. It felt as though my heart had been ripped from my chest. She tried to comfort me, kissed my forehead, and then she sent me off to school. But I was a shell of myself. I sat in class, completely disconnected from everything around me. My friends meant the world to me, but I couldn't bring myself to engage in meaningless chatter. Homework and someone's crush from 8th period were the furthest things from my mind. For a week, I lived in silence, lost in my thoughts I never faced before. Death had come to my family, and it brought questions I wasn't prepared for. I knew death was a part of life, but she was only 26. This opened up a new part of my mind, trauma. Janice was my first close loss I experienced that wasn't from natural causes. It took me a long time to accept that she was really gone until her funeral, and that weight of the reality hit me. Even though she is no longer physically with me, I come to realize that her presence lingers in the world around me. I feel her spirit in the rustling leaves of the tree, in the gentle breeze that sweeps through after a long, warm day. She is there in the quiet moments, in the stillness of nature, and in the beauty that comes after enduring someone's storms. Her grace, her strength, and her resilience live on, guiding me as I navigate life without her by my side. She is still here with me, not just as a memory, but as an ever-past force, encouraging me as I grow, figure out new ways to succeed, and continue on my journey. I carry her spirit with me in everything I do and every challenge I face. I know she's here, helping me push forward. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Lucas Kane.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lucas Kane, and this is an excerpt from a story that I wrote in Professor Meagan Lucas's fiction class this semester. It is an excerpt. This is a dark fantasy story about a poor boy who finds himself in possession of a power a bit too great. It is called The Charmer of Derry-Vattel. It reminds me of cabbage when my mother's head falls off the blade into the basket. My father's head is heavier, but his patchy hair still looks like leaves as it impacts the ground. The blade lifts from their necks, and a man adorned in red claps his hands. The audience follows. This is what Derry-Vattel does with filth, who threaten the safest and most beautiful city in all of Centrum, he says. The audience roars and claps. I join the noise, screaming in anguish until men in armor drag me away. They drag me past the beauty of central Derry-Vattel. I see the amazing architecture, the fountains, the people dressed in their animal skins who side-eye me and contort their faces. They drag me past the good smells that make my hunger noticeable again. They drag me until the beauty stops and we reach my home. Home to me is the cracked streets, the rats, and the putrid smell. They choke at it and throw me into a pile of trash in an underpass. Keep the image of your dead parents in your mind, child. And think of it the next time you're about to step out of your place, one of them says. I keep screaming until my voice stops working and I lose consciousness. Eventually, rats start scratching my skin, so I must move again. How long is it that I've sat here, nestled in trash like a bird in a nest of rot, barely alive? I cannot remember. It feels like a month that I've not moved in fear of what I'll face if I return to the streets. I've been living in filth like this since I was born, so why only now do the streets look so disgusting and deadly? The first time I saw a rotting cadaver was the last time I felt this way. I wept, but my mother averted my gaze from the corpse's maggot-full eye sockets to her full orange eyes. Serling, honey, in your life you'll come across those who no longer have their life, but you need not fear them. She wiped my tears away, because even though their body is here, their mind is in another place far away, where they'll one day be united with all that have ever loved them. Will that ever happen to me? I don't want my mind to go anywhere else, I said, my high voice squeaking with dread. One day, we will all leave this place, dear. Yeah, but the important thing is that now you are here and you are loved. As long as you love your now, you need not worry about your later. She kissed my forehead and my tears started to dry. It's because they're gone. My parents' love let me not see that I'm disgusting. If I keep feeling this way, I think I'll die. I understand what I need to do now, so I start working. I scrounge the streets and I cycle through the odd jobs, and the local shop owners are willing to spare me some coins for. My father used to tell me a story of his union with my mother. He went to the store and purchased the cheapest flowers because that was all he could afford. But my mother, never having received flowers before, was pleased to tears. She knew buying those flowers meant he would not be able to eat for days. Our love kept me fed. I was not hungry a day after we met, my dear Serling, he told me. One day you'll find such love, and then you'll no longer feel hunger as well. There's a girl I've always admired. She is a regular at Regatta's Pasta. When I walk into the kitchen to get my pay, I can see a glimpse of her and her friends giggling over a plate of pasta every Saturday. They call her Colette. She looks so good in her modest white dress and ivory bow that I would like nothing more than to kiss her. So on Friday, I go to the flower market and purchase some daffodils. They are very pretty. The color in the middle reminds me of her hair. Then I collect my pay and make myself look as presentable as I can. When she and her friends are ready to depart, I decide it's time. Hello, Colette. You look very dashing today, I say, hiding the flowers. What? She asks. I said you look dashing today, I repeat. Her friends giggle loudly. Yeah, who are you? I'm Serling Penurio, and I've admired you for months. Your beauty is so much greater than any girl I've ever seen, and I shuffle closer, getting ready to reveal the flowers, but she steps back and suddenly covers her nose. What's that smell? Is that you? She exclaims. Lost my place. You smell like a week-old cadaver. My heart sinks, but I continue anyway. I wanted to know if you want to go on a date with me. I reveal the flowers, and she removes her hand from her nose in a momentary silence. Then an ugly, mocking laugh erupts from her beautiful mouth. Her friends follow. The rest of the restaurant turns their attention to the disgusting slum rat in the middle of the sophisticated folk. He tried to ask me on a date, she says. That's genuinely so sad for you. She reaches up a hand to shoo me away like a noble would, and the manager trudges into the kitchen to kick me out. He tells me that I can't work there anymore. So I arrive back at the underpass, and I set myself back in the nest of the discarded parchment and leather that I call a bed now, clutching the flowers to my chest. As it grows dim in the evening, the fatigue drives me to sleep again. I hadn't eaten for 4 days in order to buy the flowers, so I begin to enter a sleep I don't feel certain I'll wake up from. Death, it feels so close, it feels so soothing. But I'm interrupted. The sound of wood on rock rattles me awake. Quickly I scramble for my bag of valuables and I hold it close. I back up to the stone wall of the underpass and I scan the area. There's little I can see in the dark, but off the shore of the canal I can make out a figure. A person is walking ashore. He or she appears to be wearing long, flowy garments and a crown. I dare not say anything or move. The sound of wood on stone continues as the figure looks to be dragging something ashore. I think it's a vessel, but the street lights in the slums of Derry Vitel, they're no longer lit. The canal would be impossible to navigate at this hour. Suddenly, I feel a sharp pain. It's the rats again. Their small claws tear across my body, and I can't stop myself from shooing them away. It makes a crinkling sound, and my stomach sinks once I realize the figure has stopped making noise. I think about getting up and running, but I'm too weak. My heart beats in my ear, and I curl up as small as I can get. I can hear footsteps now, growing closer. Poor lad, there's no need to wind up like a roly-poly. An old raspy voice greets me. I lift my head to slowly see he's lit a lamp and sat before me. He's a bald, elderly man in a long robe with a big, toothless smile. He must have taken off the crown. Don't hurt me, please, I say. Why, of course not. I'm simply here to help, he says. Help? How? I ask. Well, let me introduce myself first. I am called Faust. I am a merchant of nowhere. Nowhere? No, nowhere. Where? You know where. His smile widens. I stop asking questions. I travel to the places in the world where people are most in need, and I help them. So, lad, what is it that you need? I can tell by your eyes that you have freshly cried, and I can tell by your sleeping under a bridge that you have no home. Would you like a place to stay, a warm meal, perhaps? No, I don't need any of those things, I reply. The only thing I need is love. The love of my parents kept us happy, but alone I'm no one. Then you are better than most lads. They want sugar, they want talent, riches, but all you want is for someone to share your love with. I can give you that, Faust says. You can? How? I ask. I'm a man of magic, and I will give you the ability to easily find love for a small price, says Faust. A price? I have no money. I have nothing. Then you will give me something in the future, when you have found a better life, when you have found the love you seek. Truthfully? I ask. All you have to do is shake my hand, and what you desire is yours. Faust extends his long, spindly arm and reveals a hand that has an odd symbol at the center of it. The symbol begins to glow red. At this moment, I know he's telling the truth, so I grab his hand. That is it.
Our next reader is Becca Nichai.
I apologize for my attire, first off. I completely forgot this was today. Hi, my name is Becca. I am a user experience and interface design major. And a little backstory before I this microphone. Before I start, I grew up around naval bases and Air Force bases. So I was always near the water. My dad was in the Navy. And we lived down in Virginia at one point. I wasn't really there to recollect all of that. But I always remember being near the water and seeing clammers. That's like a big area that they're at, especially down at Newport News. So yeah, I am very into horror as well. So this is a little bit of a horror psychological messed up thing. So yeah. 1 minute we were hauling in cages. The next we were fighting to stay upright as waves crashed over the bow. Danny was screaming something about securing the winch while Sam and Alan struggled with the nets. John's voice barely carried over the howling wind as he fought with the wheel, trying to keep us steady. That's when Randy spotted it, something large caught in our final cage. As we hauled it up, the rain beating down like nails, we saw it. A body, bloated and pale, tangled in her nets. Lightning flashed, illuminating its face for just a moment. I remember thinking how peaceful it looked, despite everything. The boat rocked so hard that before I could grab the rope in my view, I slid across the deck and slammed my head against the cage. I knocked out cold. I could no longer feel the icy rain, but warmth, calm warmth. I woke up back in my bunk. A towel was wrapped around my head. John came in with a cigarette for me. "How's your head? Think you could still haul ass?" "Yeah, just a little achy. What happened?" The storm raged for hours. Everything but was back in order on deck, though. "We got to talk about what we found in the cage last night." "Come up on deck when you're ready." John closed the door behind him and shuffled down the hall. When I arrived on deck, I looked across the ocean. Nothing looked familiar. The navigation was fried, the radio dead, just an endless gray ocean in every direction. Everyone finally gathered, all of us trying to not look at the shape beneath the tarp on the deck. The storm had finally calmed, but something else had taken its place. A tension, a fog, thick as tar, that seemed to coat everything. "We need to talk about what we're going to do with them." Sam finally broke the silence, his hands wrapped around the coffee mug that had gone cold hours ago. "Should have thrown that cage right back in the moment we pulled it up," Randy muttered, pacing the deck around the body. "Bad luck having a dead man on board." Danny leaned forward, hands on his knees hunched over. "Anyone notice something odd about him? The way he looks. I mean, he can't have been in the water for that long. He's too..." He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "Too fresh." Alan finished for him. Like he just went under. John stood by the edge, staring at the endless gray calm that surrounded us. "That's not the only thing that ain't right. Anyone recognize where we are? Because I sure as hell don't." I felt my stomach tighten. We'd been trying not to think about it, but he was right. The coastline had vanished completely, and not just because the distance or the weather. "Navigation's fried," Sam said, running his hand through his hair. "Compass is spinning like a damn top. Radio's nothing but static. It's like what?" Randy snapped. "Like we're nowhere at all." The silence that followed was deafening. No waves lapping against the hull like how it was before. "Did any of you get a good look at his face?" I asked, immediately regretting it as all eyes turned on me. "Before we covered him." Danny shook his head. "No, not really. Just glimpses in the lightning, though." He hesitated, glancing at the others. "Something about him seems familiar. I can't place it, though." "We need to check him for ID," John said firmly. "Might help us figure out where he came from, maybe even where we are." "You want to go through a dead man's pockets?" Randy's voice cracked slightly. "That's just asking for trouble." "You got a better idea?" John shot back. "Because right now we're floating in blind waters that I've never seen in 30 years of fishing. That man might be our only clue to getting home." No one could look at each other. We were unable to piece together how fast the job went downhill. "I'll do it," I said quickly, forcing the words out of my mouth. Everyone shot me a look again. I could feel the questioning, but couldn't hear it. I stepped forward with the creek. I took a knee near the hand sticking out under the tarp. I lifted it, avoiding the corpse's lightless eyes, reaching into his pocket and finding nothing of value, besides a coin purse and a dirty medicine bottle, with the name scratched out. "Nothing," I quietly said, with a hint of relief. The crew sighed in relief, and yet the tension grew thick once again. What if he has a family? A wife? A kid? Sam was cut off abruptly. "You think some family man would just be thrown out in the middle of the ocean? Throw him overboard so we can fix this fucking boat and get out of here." The boat groaned loudly in response. No one answered. John walked away, back into the cabin, and slammed the door. Everyone looked at each other in silence, not daring to say a word. No one could say anything else. We all silently agreed that we couldn't throw it overboard either. After some time, we followed in John's footsteps and made our way over to our bunks, slightly tossed and turned for the rest of the night. Days passed, or maybe it was weeks. Time started to blur. Over that period of time, though, the smell of the corpse became more rancid. No one could stand the smell, but physically we avoided it like the plague. Some days were better than others. Sometimes we'd catch enough clam to hold out, and other days the smell diminished our appetite. It felt like we would move in random directions. John stayed at his post day and night, navigating the calm waters with nothing but a guess. We all woke up one morning to Alan shaking, hitting, and screaming, Sam, wake your ass up. We are not playing this fucking game with you, please.
Our next reader, Grace Powers.
Hi, I'm Grace Powers. I'm a UX UI major, and I will be reading from our Animal Encounter piece, which is the creative nonfiction, and it's about the day I found my first cat. Okay. It was late into October, and snow was covering the ground as I pulled into work for my early morning shift at Spoonwood Brewery. I had been switched to morning shifts only recently when one of our prep workers suffered an injury. That particular day, however, I would be pulling a double, and I was ready for my day to be miserable. Like most places I've worked at, I lived in a state of constant annoyance with restaurant management, but loved most of the people that I worked with. Kitchens always come with a collection of unique and different types of personalities. Spoonwood was filled with some of my favorite societal misfits so far. A mix of culinary professionals, students, veterans, felons, lazy assholes, and an annoyingly needy waitstaff. All strays in our own right. No matter how much we annoyed each other during our shifts, we always came together at the end of the night to bitch about the real problem, our customers. It was a good system. As I got out of my car that morning, I could see that the smoker was already going from the large amounts of smoke billowing out of it, and the small gathering of coworkers huddled around trying to stay warm during their smoke break. I made my way towards them to say good morning, but I could tell that their attention was being occupied by something other than staying warm. They were either gossiping about the latest kitchen drama, or based on the amount of heads looking down, we had a tiny new stray in our midst. There was a kitten skirting around the edges of the smoker. He was striped and scruffy and so small. There was a chunk taken out of his left ear, and he had tufts of fur in his ears coming out that made him look like a tiny bobcat. He was trying to stay warm and no doubt looking for any spare scraps of food, much like the rest of us who were typically there to do the same thing. He knew what he was doing when he picked our restaurant, because we were suckers when it came to strays. The amount of breaks taken that day was much higher than normal, the kitten stayed well fed, and we knew he wouldn't travel too far from the area after that. My prep partner Sam kept mentioning how someone would have to take the cat home. He's already been fed by humans, so his mom won't take him back, and he won't be able to survive the winter on his own, was some of the things he would say. That seemed extreme, but I didn't know enough about cat moms in order to dispute what he was saying. Many of my coworkers seemed to agree that someone should indeed take him home, and then at least to a shelter afterwards, but no one seemed interested in taking on that responsibility. Most of them had plenty of pets or children to take care of already. I texted my roommate to see how he would feel if I brought a cat home that night, but I already knew he would be okay with it. We had just had a conversation about adopting a cat. At the end of my shift, I grabbed a box, made him a little bed out of rags and t-shirts, put him in the passenger seat, and drove him home. That night, my roommate and I compiled a list of our favorite fictional names to use for a pet, put them all into a hat, and found ourselves with a new kitten roommate named Shaggy Dog. I couldn't wait to shop for him, play with him, spoil him, and cuddle him every night for the rest of time. It was a chance for me to prove to myself that I was responsible enough to take care of another being aside from myself. The next day, I went shopping to buy everything I would need to give him a comfortable home: the best beds, the best toys, blankets, a cat tower, litter boxes, and a variety of different kinds of cat food to make sure I had one that he would enjoy. I took him to the vet to get him checked out for health issues and get him his shots, and it was there that I was able to discover one of his favorite future snacks, Easy Cheese. The vet used it to lure him out of his cat carrier. I would go on to learn that he was actually a fan of most kinds of processed cheese. He loved Easy Cheese, Kraft mac and cheese, and white cheddar popcorn.
Okay, our next reader, Hannah Frustorfer.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name's Hannah. I am a senior English major, and I'm actually going to be reading a piece that I wrote in my nonfiction class this semester, and it's called Someone Worth Knowing. How would you describe me to a stranger? That's what the card I pulled from the We're Not Really Strangers deck said. My friends and I are frequent players, usually pulling it out after a few drinks. It's more fun that way, because by the next morning, we've all forgotten what the card said and what everyone's answers were, so it's still a fresh game the next time we play. The premise of the game is simple: make connections. You pull a card and answer it as honestly as possible. Sometimes you'll pull a card and the group has to go around and answer the question instead. But no matter what card you pull, if you're not being vulnerable, then you're not playing the game right. That night was our last Sunday night of the semester. It was a big group of us. There were some people in the room that I knew nothing about besides their names. But what a better way to play We're Not Really Strangers than with strangers, right? At first, I got the answers that I expected. My roommates and friends responding with traits like nice and quiet and other things I'd heard a million times in my life. There were much worse ways to be described to a stranger, though, but I knew those answers were coming. Then it came time for our friend Gavin to answer. I had met Gavin in creative writing class the semester prior, but we never exchanged more than friendly conversation and critiques during class. I figured there was no chance he knew enough about me to give more than a surface-level answer. Instead, he said, I would tell a stranger that you are someone worth knowing. The room went silent for a beat, like I wasn't the only one who didn't expect that answer. I had smiled, choked out a thank you to Gavin, and prompted the next person to take their turn before I burst into tears. The next card was read, and the moment was forgotten by everyone else. The game carried on, but I stayed in that moment for the rest of the night. I was coming off, quite frankly, the worst month of my life. It was one in which I had a sudden falling out with my friends that forced me to move into another apartment for the last 3 weeks of the semester. And barely 24 hours later, I was broken up with by my first boyfriend in a short phone call, out of nowhere and without explanation. On top of that, it was final season, and I was drowning in approaching deadlines and study guides. The last few weeks of my junior year were spent struggling to get out of bed, forcing myself to eat, and crying on the phone to my mom. It was a time in my life when I felt extremely easy to be left behind. Over and over again, I felt like the kid who got picked last for kickball at recess. I felt like the person that no one minded having around, but ultimately no one would notice if I stopped showing up. I was stuck in my head, constantly questioning what it was about me that people made okay with living their lives without me. There were so many people who I would do anything to keep in my life. Why did it seem like I wasn't that person for anyone else? My thoughts were so consuming that until that moment, I was blind to the fact that I was that person to the very people in that room that night. I was that person to the girls who welcomed me into their apartment with open arms when I had nowhere else to go, and to the people who immediately took me under their wings and started including me in everything they did when I was in desperate need of good friends. Even when I didn't feel up to it, they pushed me to go out with them, whether that was to the bars on a Saturday night or just to the caf for lunch. On that night, I realized that I was surrounded by people who loved me unconditionally. Even the strangers in the room treated me like a friend they'd known forever. It took me a while, but I knew then that I had finally found my people. They were the ones who made me feel like I was someone worth knowing.
Okay, our next reader is Tori Rojas.
Hello, I'm Tori Rojas. I'm a second-year user experience user interface design major. Today I'm going to be reading to you my Animal Encounter creative nonfiction piece titled The Cold Edge of Connection. The winters of my childhood in Pennsylvania always created mystical snowscapes in my backyard. Nothing like the dreary winters of today, where gray skies linger and the chill feels more biting than magical. Thick snow blanketed the ground, transforming the world into a wonderland, much like something straight out of a Kincaid painting. Each flake fell silently, accumulating into a soft, white quilt that smoothed over the imperfections of the landscape. Behind my childhood home, the yard was flat, with a porch that extended from our house. A few yards back from the edge of the rust-colored wood was a tall, steep hill. To the left of the porch was a large extension of flat land that led to the nearest street. Winter's touch transformed the space into a seemingly endless Arctic world with pristine snow covering all areas. One particular year, I was playing in the snow all by myself, though in retrospect, I was probably too young to be alone. But I kept myself company, weaving imaginary scenarios that kept my mind entertained. Giving myself a small square of the yard in which I could play, I made sure not to disrupt any of the snow outside the area. I was fascinated by the beauty of the fresh snowfall and was determined to preserve it as much as possible. In my area, I danced around, created snowballs, and imprinted my hand into the ground, sprinkling snow on places I thought I'd made too much of a mess. After a while, I looked out onto the yard I hadn't yet touched. The snow sparkled in stillness, its surface glittering from the sun. The perfect contours of the ground looked too remarkable to be real, even though they were right before me. A sudden breeze swept the ground, picking up some fresh flurries. I watched them dance, spiraling together until they met with the ground. Everything was as it should be. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. Turning my head, I watched as a trail of snow began to crumble and break. The serene landscape I had just been admiring was now disrupted by this path of uprooted snow. What's doing that? I wondered. I followed the disrupted trail to the base of our hill. The ground crumbled inwards, first slowly, then quickly, shifting left and right beneath me. I dropped to my knees, waiting until there was a moment of stillness, and reached into the icy surface. For only a moment, my hand met with something small and furry. Determined, I followed its movements and once again shot my hand into the ground. My arm extended out, I slowly reeled it towards me. Within my closed fists, I could feel something squirming. When I shakily began to uncurl my gloved fingers, I was surprised to find a baby mole nestled in my palm. I had never realized they existed outside of children's books. I brought him closer to my face, our eyes meeting in a moment of mutual curiosity. Maybe I wasn't so alone in the snow after all. Slowly, I used my teeth to take off the glove on my free hand and reached out to the creature. Fantastically, it felt as though he was reaching back to me. In an instant, I realized he was pushing me with his teeth, but by that time, he had already clamped down on my finger. I screamed in pain and shook my hand violently, but the mole held on for dear life. Panicking, I yanked my hand back and flung it out like tossing a frisbee, and the mole flew across the yard. Being so small and light, the creature landed atop the snow and slid a few feet before coming to a stop. He found his ground and looked back at me. At that moment, the snow was undisturbed again. Breaking the stillness, I ran inside in tears, stomping across the snow that I had left untouched. The perfect landscape I had been protecting was now left a disrupted disaster. The snow was still white, but its surface was left scarred by a path of destruction that would remain until winter's departure. What once seemed like a magical, undisturbed world now felt cold and indifferent. The stillness I had clung to, the harmony I had imagined, was fleeting, a quiet reminder that no matter how hard I tried to hold on, life would always find a way to break through. That perfect, glittering snow was something I could never protect, something beyond my control. Today, I'm a sophomore in college. Leaving my dorm, I'm usually unaccompanied, though in retrospect, I'm probably too old to still be alone. There's a heaviness that comes with solitude, a quiet fear of disrupting the delicate snow of my surroundings. Each day feels like a fresh canvas, pristine and untouched, yet I hesitate to make my mark. I wonder if reaching out to others will only lead to unexpected pain, just like that encounter with the baby mole. Will they bite back? The thought lingers, casting shadows over my attempts to connect. I've learned to navigate the world with slight caution, often standing on the edge of social circles, watching as friendships bloom and flourish. I have friends, sure, but they're not connected to one another to form a tight-knit community. The beauty of those group connections tempt me, yet I can't shake the fear of what might happen if I step in too boldly. Will I be met with warmth, or will I, too, end up flung away, my trust shattered like that snow underfoot? Each moment spent alone feels like a shield, protecting me from the possibility of hurt, but also binds me in silence, leaving me longing for companionship. The balance between vulnerability and safety is a fragile one. As I navigate this new landscape, I often wonder if risk is worth the reward. So here I stand at crossroads, contemplating whether to take that step forward into the unknown or retreat back into the safety of solitude. The question looms, will I choose to embrace the messiness of life, or will I remain an observer, forever wary of the bite?
Okay, our next reader is Isabella Marasco.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Isabella, and I will be reading you guys a piece tonight that I wrote titled Stupid Girls. For as long as I can remember, I've littered my journal pages with entries about boys. And each time I do, I roll my eyes a little, because here we go again, another one, and I feel like such a stupid girl. I mean, don't you know? Girls are stupid. They are the ones that let boys use and abuse them. My dad says that girls act certain ways because they didn't have good dads. They didn't have a dad tell them that they love them each day. So they look for validation elsewhere, and I nod my head. He says, it's a good thing you have a dad who told you he loved you each and every day. And I nod my head, because this is true. But then I think of other things he told me, like stop eating so much, shave your mustache, and I was foolish to think I was lucky to have you as a daughter. But at least he told me that he loved me. I used to be a smart girl, until a certain boy came around and made me stupid. For the longest time, I thought I was set apart from the rest, that I couldn't be affected. My mom always told me that a certain type of boy would come along and tell you he loves you and that all logic would go out the window. I didn't believe her, but as of recently, I seem to like the fresh air. After I ended things, he came back again and again. Now here we are, the stage of prove it. Prove that you love me like you say. Prove to me above all else that I am not stupid. Prove to me you mean it when you say we have chemistry, even though a part of me thinks he could have chemistry with a loaf of bread if he really wanted to. I know what I'm doing is stupid. Every time he compliments me, holds my hand, or asks me how my day is, I can't help but question if it's true. I can't help but think of the others before me, and I feel so stupid, because I know my intentions are pure, and the fact that I have to question his should be the only answer I truly need. But here I am, throwing caution to the wind anyway, like an idiot. He tells me not to be afraid, like it's simple, that it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all, which is easy for someone to say when you've loved a lot. But for someone like me who hasn't, it's not so easy. Yet here I am doing it anyway, like a stupid girl. But when I think of all the facts, I consider the accuracy of this belief that has been so ingrained. If my intentions are pure, how am I the stupid one? If I wanted validation from my father when I was a child, how am I the stupid one? If I wanted to love someone and have them love me in return, how am I the stupid one? Maybe girls aren't so stupid after all. Thank you.
Our next reader is Emma Wise.
Hi, my name is Emma, and today I'm going to be reading a couple pages from my fiction story, Gia Roberts and Mr. Muse versus the Thing in the Woods. Basically, all you need to know is there are unsolved murders in Gia's hometown, and she's also seeing visions of a tall, dark figure in the woods behind her house. A week passed before the next body was found. A girl that looked remarkably like the first, same age, same body type, same hair color, same skin tone. Gia didn't recognize her either, but shuddered all the same. People were saying it was a serial killer because the girls were so similar. Jillian Porter was her name, and she was also found in the woods, brutally beaten and tortured. The halls were buzzing with fear and morbid curiosity, building into a crescendo. The principal relayed the sheriff's statement over the announcements. Everyone is to travel in pairs and be home before dark. The sheriff strongly recommends if you are female, aged 15 to 16, with blonde hair, fair skin, and a slim build, to exercise extra caution. Dye your hair or buy a wig to be safe. Anyone with information, call the sheriff's department or tell an adult. Thank you. Gia rushed home that day, only stopping to occasionally catch her breath or anxiously look around for anyone tailing her. My lack of friends could quite literally kill me. It was not a hard sell to be able to stay home from school the next day. Her mom was not convinced Gia's tan skin and black girls were going to save her. She stayed in bed, trying to chase away her despair for most of the day. The loud trills of an ambulance eventually got her out of bed and over to her window. It was parked right on the outskirts of the forest, 2 paramedics carrying a stretcher with a very bloody blonde mass on it. Gia ran from her room to the toilet and retched. Gia awoke the next morning, groggy from a sleeping pill-induced slumber. A firm idea took root almost immediately. She couldn't shake it despite its ridiculousness. What if I... No, I couldn't. The next few days passed in the blur, but the idea remained. Mr. Muse looked at her with his usual air of all-knowing superiority. What do you think, Mr. Muse? Should I solve a murder? He chirped back, rolling over on her bed, already done with the conversation. Gia was undeterred as usual by his disinterest. I know. I'm not even motivated enough to do my homework. How could I solve a murder? It's too crazy. Only 15 minutes later, Gia was out the door with Mr. Muse, heading towards the woods. The forest called to her like a siren song. Gia didn't resist the pull. She couldn't. 3 people were dead. And as of 20 minutes ago, this was her purpose. She had to follow through. The last body, Grace Marikove, was found here. That meant something, and she had to start somewhere. Well, this is grim, Gia muttered to Mr. Muse, who weaved comfortingly in between her legs. She forced herself deeper and deeper into the woods, keeping a swift pace so she wouldn't turn and run back home. The trees seemed to groan around her. The fog seemed unnaturally thick. Every bone in Gia's body told her to leave, and all of her senses were heightened the further she ventured. Mr. Muse's fur was spiked, and he growled gutturally into the darkness. What is it, Muse? What do you see? Before Gia could stop him, the tuxedo cat took off like a hurling ball of rage. Within seconds, the darkness had swallowed up Gia's only friend in the whole world. Mr. Muse, come back! If you die, I'm killing myself. Gia raced after him, tears of fear streaming down her face. She couldn't lose him. Mr. Muse was all she had. Dark red splotches littered the earthy floor, giving Gia a trail she desperately didn't want to follow. It looked like something was dragged off. The blood smeared, then tapered into spurts. She slowed, fervently praying to a god she didn't believe in. Please don't be Mr. Muse. Please don't be Mr. Muse. Please, 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 please. I'll do anything. I'll go to church. I'll stop liking girls, maybe. Just please let my cat be alive. She reluctantly sulked towards the brush that was probably hiding the body of her dead cat. God, I will kill you with my 2 bare hands if my cat is dead. Gia reached forward to push away the brush. Your cat is fine, Giovanni. She whirled around with a screech at the otherworldly voice. A tall, shadowy figure stood before her. The one from her dream. She knew immediately, its eyes the same stark yellow. How do you know? Mr. Muse! He had calmly trotted out of the shadows, rubbing up against the mysterious figure. Gia scooped him up in a flash, squeezing and kissing until Mr. Muse squawked in protest. Don't ever run off like that again, Muse. You know I'm anxiously attached to you. Gia glanced back to the figure before her. How do you know my name? I know a lot about you. Fear and curiosity battled for dominance inside Gia, adrenaline coursing through every inch of her. She tried to reason with herself that if it wanted to kill her, it would have done so by now. Besides, Mr. Muse trusts him, and he's an excellent judge of character. I'm a thing. Hello, thing. Are you going to kill me? To Gia's utter shock, it laughed. The laugh was somehow familiar. I only kill evil things. You're not evil, but he is. Its long, sharp claws peeled back the brush, revealing a man with his throat slashed. Gia was too shocked to scream. She took an uneasy step back. She wouldn't be able to outrun it, but she had to try. I told you, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help. So it was him, the murders? The thing didn't bother nodding. It didn't need to. You want a purpose? I'm here to give it to you. Kill evil people and give others a purpose. Your grief and pain aren't for nothing, my child. I'm going to help you so you can help others. You think I'm capable of killing someone? You're not. That's why you have to. Pain is useless for things if it's tinged with malice. All you have to do is die. You've wanted to do that for a while now. I'm giving you the gift of coming back with purpose. Maybe that will chase away some of that pesky guilt. You want to be a thing, Giovanni. I know you do. Gia tore through the forest toward her home, Mr. Muse hot on her tail. There wasn't a lot of time. It had to be before daybreak. She didn't have a lot of things to get in order, but Gia's sense of urgency carried her at a breakneck speed. It was so close to being over. The sound of a gun going off startled her. For a second, Gia forgot she was the one who shot it. Blood and gore painted the forest floor, Gia's body falling with a soft, almost apologetic thud. The soft earth was like a welcoming embrace. By now, her mother would have found her note. Maybe she was calling the police with trembling hands and a quivering voice. Maybe she was sitting on Gia's bed in a numb state of shock. Maybe she was tearing through the woods, screaming her name, and hoping she would stop what was already finished. She couldn't. It was too late. Gia had only seconds left to live. It was almost over. There was no fear, no sadness, no pain, just peace. Finally. Thank you.
Our next reader is Kelsey Vanderhoof.
Like he said, my name is Kelsey. I'm a UX UI design major. I'm a sophomore. I'm going to be reading from my short story, The Witcher's Moon, about a girl named Chrissy who finds herself connected to something way more demonic than she thought possible. Just to find, where was I starting? Of course, when she got home, her house was still empty. Her parents were out late again. Nothing new here. They were always on business trips or staying late at the office. It always felt like they were running from something. Her grandmother was the only one that took care of raising her. She was always there when Chrissy needed her. From a scraped knee to an A on a big test, she was there with comfort or praise. The house felt so empty ever since she died. Her parents practically rushed to get rid of all of her things, making the house seem even more barren than it already had. With no one left to clean and take care of the house but Chrissy, it became dusty and full of cobwebs. The closet could really use a clean. She couldn't remember the last time it was even opened. She could smell the mildew as soon as she opened the door. She reached for the light. Rats, busted bulb, she huffs. She goes looking for a new one. It's no wonder this bulb is out. It's almost rusted to the ceiling fixture. It takes all of her might to loosen the bulb, just to fling her arm into a pile of junk on the top shelf, hurling all of it and herself to the ground. What was even up there? She groans in agony. She reluctantly gets up and puts the stepladder back in place to put the new bulb in. As the light flickers to life, she sees a square in the ceiling. Seems to be a cubbyhole entrance, and it's just slightly ajar. I didn't know we had an attic, she says, puzzled. She gets higher on the ladder and slowly cracks the door open the rest of the way, cobwebs and dust filling her lungs. With curiosity, she pushes her way up and into the attic. It was bigger than she thought it was going to be, but the roof was very low. There were a few cardboard boxes that filled the space. She took a peek in the boxes and found that they were full of her grandmother's old stuff, along with some old Halloween and Christmas decorations. She wondered where those had gone. She got up to look in some of the other boxes and overestimated the height of the ceiling, busting the back of her head on a wooden beam. If I didn't get a concussion earlier, I definitely have one now, she said as she holds the back of her head with her left hand. She pulls it away and notices something on it. Oh, great. Now I'm bleeding. She decides to go down and clean the blood and dust off of her when something catches her attention in the clutter of her grandmother's stuff. A small, black box sitting just around the corner of the bigger boxes. She crawls her way over to get a better look, and she feels an eerily familiar feeling about the box. She grabs it and tries to make her way back out of the attic. Forgetting all about her head, she sits down at the dining room table. It's a simple wooden box, but the intricate black metal details around the seams and edges. On the front, there's a metal lock. She tries to jiggle the lock, thinking it might just break away. That was wishful thinking. It doesn't even budge. She shifts the box into her right hand and grabs the lock with her left to try and get a better grip, and the lock immediately jumps open. Chrissy jumps in her seat a little. Confused how that worked, she shrugs it off and decides to open the box. Inside is a dagger. She held it in her hands, and it felt so natural. The handle was a perfect fit for her hand, seeming as if it was molded just for her grip. It was beautiful, with a purplish tint to the hilt and the most intricate carvings into its smooth wood. The carvings almost looked burned in, circles and lines in different directions. The blade itself was smooth to the touch, glinting in the slightest of light. It almost looked like it was brand new, as if it hadn't been sitting in the attic. The dagger had a warm glow that Chrissy could feel. It almost sent pulses through Chrissy, faint, but it matched up with the beating of her heart. The more she looked at the carvings, the more oddly familiar they seemed. As she pondered over this, her gaze drifted to her forearm, covered in the doodles from the school day. She realized in that moment why they seemed so similar. They were the same. She knew this all couldn't have just been a coincidence. Tucked farther in the box was a note. She decides to read it. Dear Chrissy, if you somehow find this letter, then my prophecies came true. I hope there's still time for you to be safe in what awaits you. You're very special, Chrissy. I just hope you don't. The doorbell rings.
Our next reader is Audrey Vereshak.
I'm Audrey Vershak. I'm an English major, and today I will be reading from the beginning of my creative fiction piece titled Bandits of the Banking World. Essentially, it's about a group of raccoon bandits robbing banks with their animal alliances and replacing bills with counterfeit money. The night was perfect. There was no wind and no rain. It was completely silent, with the trees rustling in the wind and the occasional sound of a car passing by. From the sycamore tree outside of the Redwood City Bank, Gizmo surveyed the scene. His movements were sharp, and he looked with calculation. His nose twitched and his fur flowed in the wind. As he stretched his outreached paw into dusk, feeling the bark underneath his claws, Gizmo realized that tonight was the night. Beside him, Ranger tweaked with excitement. Gizmo gave Ranger the signal, and they were off. This was the first phase of the plan. They both silently jumped from the tree branch to the roof of the bank. For months, they had studied people, they observed human movements, and watched diligently as the days passed by. Days turned into weeks, which turned into months, before they had finally learned all of the human patterns. Now, all of the patience and planning was about to pay off. They had spent countless hours perched in the trees and slinking through alleyways hidden by nightfall. Each evening brought new discoveries, the subtle cues in human behavior, the slackening posture of tired guards, and the impatient strides of customers eager to leave. They studied the patterns with almost reverent focus, learning to anticipate every shift in routine. Weekdays followed a steady rhythm. The guards arrived precisely at 6 a.m., yawning over coffee as they passed each other, oblivious to anything unusual. The lunch hour saw a steady stream of people, like clockwork, creating a brief frenzy before dwindling back to silence. By Friday, the rhythm quickened, with rushed, distracted footsteps and hands too full to notice anything out of the ordinary. They observed everything, from how the cameras moved in their slow sweep to how long it took the guard to check his phone. Months of watching, listening, and waiting had built their confidence, transforming once foreign movements into intricate dance they knew by heart. Now, standing poised on the roof, every piece was in place, and the human patterns they'd mastered were about to be their ticket inside. Gizmo and Ranger scurried along the roof, carefully avoiding the path of surveillance. They finally reached the air duct, which was their point of entrance they had identified during their tireless months of recon. Ranger clawed it open with utter ease and crawled in, while Gizmo followed. They vanished into the shadows, looking to exploit the weakness of humans. Inside the bank was just as silent as the outside biome. There was a background hum of constantly running electronics. The security cameras rode back and forth, but this wasn't new information to Gizmo and Ranger. They silently dropped down out of the air ducts and initiated the second phase of their plan. They spotted the bank lobby and made their entrance, landing softly on their paws, barely making a sound. Above them, the disturbed ceiling tiles swayed, but it didn't matter. The humans wouldn't notice anything until the morning anyway, and by that time, it would be too late.
There's a joke in crime writing where you never want someone to look at your search history. So, like, one time I was like, how to spot a meth lab. But Audrey came and she was like, I had to look up and Google what raccoon names were. Like Gizmo and Rangers. Nicely done. All right, our last reader for the night is Brody Westover.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brody Westover. I'm a junior secondary ed English major. Today I'm going to be reading a piece from my creative nonfiction. I kind of took an encounter I had with some cardinals and kind of extrapolated it into this idea of like the folklore of my childhood. So my childhood was full of old wives' tales and superstitions. If you spill the salt, toss some over your shoulder. Tape money in your window before each new year to bring wealth to the family. Always take your Christmas tree down before the new year because you can never have two in 1 year. There were an endless amount of these tales, and I treated them like gospel because as a kid, I couldn't really differentiate between the two. At one point, I even thought Santa Claus and God were the same person. These stories were religion to me. When I was younger, one story I always liked said that when you see a cardinal after someone passes, it means they are reaching out to you from heaven. But when both of my maternal grandparents passed away and my mom reminded me of the tale of the cardinals, I didn't have the heart to tell her that I didn't believe in that stuff anymore. These rules and myths encompass the folklore of my childhood. They are little guidelines that make not a bit of sense, with arbitrary or entirely vague consequences. I was taught in grade school that ancient people create myths and legends to explain the world around them. But these seemingly minuscule rituals of my childhood do not exist to explain anything. Scientists say that humans tell stories for survival. Most superstitions are probably based on some real or imagined fear from the past. However, I believe there is more to this view of superstitions. In Carl Lavani's article for The Medium, The Science Behind Storytelling, he writes, "Humans don't have sharp fangs, thick hides, or blinding speed. Our evolutionary advantage has always been our problem-solving ability, and in particular, our ability to solve problems as a group," end quote. These stories give humans an evolutionary advantage because of our camaraderie with one another, and so much of personhood is about being independent. Because they are passed down generations, these tales and myths protect us and strengthen our connection to one another as humans. I think there's an even simpler explanation for superstitions, though. More than anything, these stories give people hope. Life is filled with uncertainties and impasses, so it's only natural for people to look for the light. I can remember the glint of joy in my mother's eyes as I helped her tape the crumpled bill up in the window. As I was fumbling with small, clumsy hands to rip the next piece of tape, she was hoping for a new year where we didn't have to eat lunch meat for dinner in between paychecks. After the funeral, I remember watching as her brow unfurrowed, as she noticed the butterflies in between my grandparents' blueberry bushes as we were all gathered outside. Reflecting on my family's experience, I see the value in letting yourself believe in things. The truth or reason behind these stories is not nearly as relevant when considering the peace they can bring people. So, as I stood captivated by the cardinals on the side of the road, I felt hopeful. Do I normally see cardinals this time of year? I forgot all about the long drive and my looming deadlines, so I remained still while I watched the birds as both of them flew off, one after another. My eyes followed them until I could no longer make out their red bodies, as the hanging branch where they sat perched was left swaying in the wind. I felt like I should have waved. Thank you.
Whenever we do this, everyone is always so nervous, but again, all y'all, I'm so proud of you, so give yourself a hand. All right, we're going to take a quick break. If you're in my class or Professor Lucas's class, meet us over here so we can get a class photo, and then we'll reconvene for open mic under the capable leadership of Lucas Kane. All right, thank you all for coming.
Alrighty. Hello, I'm Lucas Kane. I'm pretty sure everyone in this room knows me, so I don't really have to say that. We got our open mic, so I had personally had a very nice time hearing everyone read. It was very nice, very nice job, everybody. So, without further ado, we got our nice trio of open mic people. First up, we have Adia. Man, I haven't seen Adia.
This is a poem called Cannibal. And take this off so it's clearer. Fathers cannibalize their daughters whether they eat them or not. Every would-be father follows in the steps of Kronos and swallows his children whole. If you're lucky, you can cut yourself free, but you probably won't. You probably can't, that's why he eats you. It's done under the guise of safekeeping. After all, it's so much softer inside a stomach lining. If only you can look past the acid. Thank you.
Hell yeah. Next, once again, we have Amy Crutchfield.
This is the year of, inspired by Warsaw-shire. The year of craving sunshine, the year of herb gardens, the smell of basil, of fertile earth. The year I stopped wondering how my stomach was shaped in a swimsuit, of embracing every line of a body that knows how to lift itself out of heartbreak. When I stopped holding words so closely, lined up along the back of my throat, and began to speak thoughts without wondering if they were wise enough to say out loud. The year of bare feet, muddy and calloused, toes dipped into creeks, ants crawling along the edges of my ankles. The purpose of life is to love your fate. The year I loved my fate. After the wreckage settled, the year I loved a man again, and this time felt no shame at all. The year of saying no, the year of saying yes, the year of saying I don't know, I don't mind that I don't know. The year of my mother, her freedom from toil, watching her bloom in a way I had never known a woman could bloom. The year my family was divided into pieces, and those of us who remained clung to each other like wild birds to branches that could build a nest, that could build a home. When I was most afraid, when I became fearless, when I stopped asking for love and started giving love. The year of the apartment floods, the year of never closing my eyes to tragedy, the year I chose to see, the year of wonder, the year I made a pledge. Whatever love is lost from me, I will give that much more.
Very nice, Amy. Thank you very much. I appreciate the poetry as a palate cleanser after all those stories. Next up, we have Emma Wise.
Hi again. So this is a sonnet I wrote about my dad who passed when I was about 12. I wrote this when I was about 16. I was a sophomore in high school, so it's pretty juvenile. Please excuse that, but it's still one of my favorite things I've ever written, and I really wanted to share it with you. I hope one day I can go back to it. It's called Dear Father. Dear Father, mornings you smelled like your coffee creamer. I was only a child when you left us. Pardon me, but now I'm quite the dreamer. You slipped through my tiny fingers like dust. I'll see you in the dream once in a while. I hope someplace better you're sipping beer. You won't be there to walk me down the aisle. Father's Day flows like molasses each year. You were never perfect, but you were mine. Something broke inside me that August day. My grief still grows like a dark, twisted vine. There's so much more I feel I need to say. Dear Father, how my heart aches for you. Your sweet memory sticks with me like glue.
All right, that is all for our open mic. Give everyone our round of applause once more. So, all right, thank you everybody for coming out. I believe that is the end of our event today, unless our other individuals have anything would like to say. So, all right, everyone, good show, good job, everybody. Let